signs of the times. It's the condition of the world at the second coming. And then Matthew 25 is also about the second coming, but it is the conditions of the church. How did that happen? Cool, man. Thank you. So it's this. So Matthew 24 is the signs of the world, and Matthew 25 is the signs of the condition of the church. So condition of the world, Matthew 24. Condition of the church, Matthew 25. Okay. So let's take one verse and just go right around the room until we get to verse 13.
Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom.
Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish.
Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them.
But the wise took flasks of oil with, sorry, Pastor, do I have a turn?
Go ahead.
The wise took flasks of oil with their lamps.
But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept.
And at midnight a cry was heard, Behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him.
Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps.
And the foolish said to the wise, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.
But the wise answered, saying, No, lest there should not be enough for us and you, but go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves.
And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut.
Afterward the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us.
But he answered and said, Assuredly I say to you, I do not know you.
Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.
Okay, so in verse 13, how do you take verse 13? Positive or negative?
Well, we're supposed to watch because we don't know when our bridegroom is coming.
Right? So is that a positive statement or a negative statement? Sounds like a warning to me.
It's positive in that we know he's coming.
But it's negative in that he's saying, you don't know whether you're going to be the 5 foolish or the 5 wise. Right? So it's definitely a warning. So when is a warning a good thing?
Aren't warnings always good things? Because they tell you to prepare to avoid a bad thing.
Right. So the car manual says if you change your oil, the life of your engine will be, longer. But if you never change your oil, what will happen? It will seize. It'll knock, right? And so a warning is good when something bad could happen. But still, a warning is negative. Okay? So Jesus is not saying, watch out because I'm going to come and take you to heaven. He's saying, watch, because 5 were foolish, 5 were wise. All of them lost their oil. Right? That's definitely a warning. It's definitely a negative warning. Okay? So let's make some points and go through it together. The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to the 10 virgins who took their lamp and went out to meet the bridegroom. So in the Bible, what is a virgin? Is it just a person who's never been married, which supposes they never had sexual relationship? Where else do we hear about a virgin in the Bible? Okay, Revelation 7 and 14, right? In Revelation 14, the 144,000 is described as these are virgins, for they have not been defiled with women. Who are these women? The fallen Protestant churches, right? The daughters of the great harlot from Revelation 17. So these virgins are a symbol of the church, right? So the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamp and went out to meet the bridegroom. So there's 3 symbols right there just in that one verse. You have the kingdom of heaven, you have the 10 virgins, the lamp, and went out to meet the bridegroom. I guess that's 4. Okay? And so now in verse 2, we begin to see what they're like. 5 of them were wise, and 5 of them were foolish. What made the wise wise, and what made the foolish foolish? Verse 3. Those who were foolish took their lamps, but no oil was in them. But verse 4, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Okay, so what stands out in verse 4? Okay. Then in verse 5, but while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. So the one with the lamp and the oil, they all fell asleep, right? So the whole church, so the 5 foolish and the 5 wise. Here is like the wheat and the tares. They're growing together until the harvest, which is another reference to the second coming. That's Matthew 13, right? So lots about the second coming in the book of Matthew. So the whole church fell asleep at some point. Are there points in your life where you feel sleeping, and then there's some points where you feel really awake? What in your spiritual life made you sleep, and what in your spiritual life made you awake? What are the circumstances of your spiritual life going to sleep, and what are the circumstances of your spiritual life being alive? This is where we discuss, and we talk, and we go back and forth. Okay? So what puts a person spiritually to sleep, and what makes a person spiritually alive? Okay? So does studying the Word make you go to sleep? It could. You read the book of Numbers, it might, right? I'm getting texts from people who are watching. Tammy says, a warning is a good thing when it always makes you want to change. Okay? But in the text, the warning is definitely negative. It is positive. So there you go. I read your text, Tammy. So, where were we? What are the circumstances of you being alive and asleep? And if you're asleep, do you know you're asleep? I mean, literally, when you wake up you only know that you were asleep from the vantage of being awake. Right? So the way to wake up, the way to get out of sleep is basically to wake up. So how do we wake up spiritually?
By reading and studying more and praying for the power of the Holy Spirit
Mm-hmm.
to wake us up.
Okay. Verse 6. And at midnight a cry was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him. Okay? What do you all understand about the midnight cry? When was the midnight cry given? What is the midnight cry? Uh-huh. Prophetically, the midnight cry was given around the time 1844. Okay? That the judgment is coming and Jesus will come immediately right after the judgment. Okay? So Seventh-day Adventists have been preaching that the second coming is imminent since right before 1844, and it started around 1833 with William Miller. Okay? So the cry went out, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Now, when you go to a wedding, there is preparation on the part of every person. Whether you're the bride, the groom, the usher, the wedding coordinator, the person sitting in the seat, the ring bearer or the Bible boy, whatever, there is preparation that everybody makes to get ready to go to a wedding. I have to write the sermon. I have to do 5 months of counseling. There's a whole lot of preparation that goes in to doing a wedding. A lot. How do we prepare for the wedding? Pray. Okay. Ada, how do we prepare for this wedding?
We fill our lamps with oil.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So we're in Matthew 25 and verse 7. 25 verse 7. Okay? So the cry was given, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. So everybody is wakened up out of their sleep. But now, then in verse 7, then all those virgins arose. So the whole church was asleep, but now this call that the bridegroom is coming has woken them up. Okay? So if the call that the bridegroom is coming is the message of the second coming of Christ, then the message of the second coming of Christ and everything that it's under its subtopics, like when you hit a file on a Word document or Microsoft Word or Office or whatever you use, Mac, whatever. You hit plus and then all these subfolders pop up, right? So the topic of the second coming with all of its subfolders and categories, that should wake us up. Okay? And now verse 9. But while the wise answered, saying, No, lest there should not be enough for you, for us and for you, but rather to those who sell, go and buy for yourselves. So why weren't the wise willing to give away their oil to the ones who didn't have any? Was it because they were selfish?
They don't have enough for themselves.
And they didn't want to be without oil because the oil is what gave them light to be ready to see the bridegroom. So the oil in this parable is very, very important.
I just had a thought about that. It just kind of hit me that thinking about the oil as the Holy Spirit, you can't have that relationship of somebody else's coattails.
Right? Okay.
Every single person has to have their own relationship with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
They have to have their own personal supply.
Right?
You can't piggyback.
Right. Like, I've heard David Asherick say God does not have grandchildren. God has children. Right? So you can't give anybody else a spiritual experience. You can't study the Bible for other people. You can't, a husband, gets up every morning and spends time with God and develops a relationship with Jesus cannot transfer that to his wife. You know how we have this Apple Pay? Does anybody use Apple Pay ever? Anybody use Zelle Pay? Like, I can send you money by Apple Pay or Zelle Pay. Zelle Pay, right? So I can give you money, but I can't give you my religious experience. Who knows? You might not want my religious experience. But the point is, everybody has their own personal background and their own circumstances and their own sleepiness and their own awakeness. You cannot transfer that to anybody. It's not possible. So now what's coming out front and center is the necessity of having the oil, because it is the oil that prepares you for when the bridegroom finally comes. Okay? And Kendra already alluded that the oil is the Holy Spirit. So what is the focus of this parable? Or who is the focus of this parable? It's better. It's the Holy Spirit. So the purpose of this parable so far, I'll save that comment for just a few seconds here. Okay, verse 10. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready, what made them ready? They had oil. So if the oil made them ready, then those who did not have the oil were not ready. Those who were ready went in with him to the wedding. So having the oil in the lamp gets you into the wedding. So having whatever the oil represents got these people into the room where they could be with the bridegroom. Verse 11, after the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. They didn't have oil, and they're now calling out to the bridegroom. But he answered, assuredly I say to you, I do not know you. Okay? So this is really powerful because the people who got to go in were known by the bridegroom. And what is the element that makes the bridegroom known to the people at the wedding? The oil. Right? So without the oil, Jesus doesn't know us. Without us having the Holy Spirit, Jesus cannot know us. So we can have a religious experience without the Holy Spirit. We could appear as if we're good Christians and coming to midweek study, going to church, good Seventh-day Adventists. It could appear to everybody that everything is okay, but no one knows what's really going on the inside. No one knows what you're thinking 5 minutes just before you fall asleep. Not your wife, not your husband, not anybody. No one knows what you think when you drive down the road going on to work, okay? That's probably what you really are deep down inside. Those moments that you're by yourself and what you do, you're never going to get caught. No one's there to watch. You know, I think George Washington said the best test of character is what you would do when no one's looking, right? Okay, so verse 11, after the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he did not, but he answered and said, assuredly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore. That is why he says, watch therefore. Watch therefore. What do you mean, watch therefore? That you do not run out of. That is a negative warning. The end result is positive, that you have the oil. But a warning is good because these guys ran out of oil, and at the last second, they came and bought oil. Now, wouldn't it be better to have oil the whole time and have there be no drama?
Yes, it would.
But doctrines like once saved, always saved, and the rapture, doesn't that lead to spiritual procrastination? Right?
Yeah, it leads to complacency
Yes?
And just see him as a
So I can do whatever I want until the rapture happens, and then when that happens, then I'll get my life right. And then on, huh?
So what happened?
Until the rapture.
Oh, is that what that's all about?
Yeah, there's totally a lot of different layers to that.
I asked you before, because it's nothing I've ever explored, I didn't know what once saved, always saved was, and it makes no sense to me.
Once saved, always saved. The doc
All you have to do is believe in Jesus and you're fine?
on January 16th, 1987, I gave my heart to Jesus and I got saved. And from that point on, once you've given your heart to Jesus, you can't,
No matter what you do?
since he's in your hand, no one can pluck you out of his hand. It's John 12. That's the verse they'll use. No one can take you out of his hand. But the context of that statement is protection from externals. But we have examples in the Bible where people have left God and backslidden, right? Like King Saul, Solomon, right? King Saul says, the Spirit of the Lord was given to him, and he was turned into another man, and the Lord gave him a new heart. But then it says the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul and moved on to David. So if you have, just from the context of the 10 virgins, if you have the oil, you're saved. And the oil represents the Holy Spirit. So if you do not have the Holy Spirit, you are not saved. So salvation equals having the Holy Spirit, according to the parable. Right? So, therefore, just from the parable of the 10 virgins, once saved, always saved cannot be biblical doctrine, because you either have the Holy Spirit or you don't. And there are examples of people that have had the Holy Spirit and then have rejected it through disobedience.
Is that why we see people who claim to be Christians but do not live a Christian life?
Right. Right. So the key element that is standing out to me, the Holy Spirit, A, gets you into the wedding. B, it is what makes known. Like, after every wedding is over, every wedding is different. I've never seen one the same. Carla and my wedding was as traditional as you can get. She wanted everything traditional, like traditional. And we came and greeted everybody row by row. We came out, we left, and then we came back in and we greeted everybody row by row. It took like forever. But that's what she wanted to do. And I'm not going to argue with her on that day. Right? So the thing is, people, it makes them feel special to be acknowledged by the bridegroom and the bride, right? What got the recognition to the bridegroom was the oil. So the point of the parable of the 10 virgins is that you could do church without the Holy Spirit, but you're not going to heaven unless you actually have a living, breathing relationship with the Holy Spirit. That's the point. Okay, is that clear? Yeah. Okay. So they all were virgins, which means virgins are a symbol of the church. Okay? They all had pure biblical beliefs. They all had lamps. They all had the Bible. All of them went out to meet the bridegroom. They were all talking about the second coming because they went out to meet the bridegroom. Right? All of them were excited about it, and all of them went to sleep. But after the call went out, 5 woke up and went out and got their lamps. They trimmed their lamps, and then they lit them, and the 5 who were foolish. So somebody who goes their whole religious experience without actually experiencing the power of God, what does Jesus call you? Foolish. This is a real serious thing, right? So Jesus calls you foolish. And the concept of cultural Christianity and just coming to church, Jesus says it's foolishness. This is a really convicting parable. I mean, I never realized how straight it really is. So half of them noticed that their lamp went out. Do you feel like your lamp is burning, or do you feel like your lamp is out right now? Okay. Okay, so at one point, all of their lamps were burning, and energy was used up, and then it was gone. How do we keep our lamps burning? The lamps of the foolish virgins that only burned for a short time show us that they did have something from the Holy Spirit. So your lamp goes out. It's not that you didn't have a genuine religious experience. You just didn't maintain your lamp. You just didn't keep putting oil in it. Meaning, just let's be practical here. What causes your lamp to go out? A fight?
Not maintaining, not seeking to improve and expand your spiritual experience through prayer.
Okay, so if the oil represents the Holy Spirit, what does the lamp represent?
I'm guessing the word of God. Yeah, a lamp.
I'd say the person. So
I see.
the Holy Spirit in the person is what gives the light. Let your light so shine before all men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven, Matthew 5:16, right? So what are the conditions that somebody's lamp goes out?
They haven't asked for the Holy Spirit. They haven't asked for it.
You ever heard of the parable of the sower? Sower went out to sow, and he cast seed on the ground. One fell among thorns, one fell among stones, one fell among good earth, and its seed took root. Right? And what was the one where the seed fell among thorns? What were the thorns? Do you remember?
All the cares and distractions.
The cares and distractions of this life. What are some of those? Degrees, right? You got to have a degree these days. If you don't, you're in trouble. Boyfriends, girlfriends, aunts, cousins, mother, daughter, husband, wife. Okay, these things are good, but when we make these things the focus, right? It's good to eat, but when eating is the focus and self is front and center, right? That causes that lamp to go out. Okay. When the 5 came in asking to be let in, Jesus answered, "I don't know you." They were too late in attending to the oil. The door remained closed. Jesus' statement that our personal relationship with him has something to do with the Holy Spirit. Whoever doesn't let himself be led by the Holy Spirit won't be acknowledged by Jesus. That is just so incredible. Okay? Somebody look up Romans 8 and 9. And we got just a few minutes left, but if we quit right now, I'd feel that we all walked out with a blessing because this is, I know I've learned some things tonight. Boy, those clouds are really angry. Okay, Romans 8 and 9, who's got that?
So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God. 7 first.
Romans 8 and 9.
So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. Now, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he is not his.
Okay, So what did Jesus just, what did Paul just say? I'm sorry. What did Paul say there? If you don't have the Spirit of God, you are not his. And if you are not his, you belong to other. Not necessarily the devil, but the world, and the world belongs to the devil, so I guess it would be. So the point of the parable is we only have access to Jesus. We only have a personal relationship with Jesus through the oil. The oil is what grants us into the wedding feast and allows Jesus to say that he knows us. Otherwise, you are only known by God, but you do not know him, right? Let's look at 1 John 3, verse 24. 1 John 3 and verse 24.
Whoever keeps his commandments abides in God, and God in him. And by this we know that he abides in us, by the Spirit whom he has given us.
So how do we know that we belong to God? Okay, now he who keeps his commandments abides in him, and he in him. And by this we know that he abides in us by the Spirit whom he has given us. So the Spirit is the one who testifies that we are actually belonging to God.
And it's through the Holy Spirit's power that we keep the commandments.
Right. Right. Okay, so this means that the assurance that I have that I am filled with the Holy Spirit is at the same time the assurance that I am in Jesus and he is with me. Okay, so I'm going to skip this part. This is a really powerful quote that I've heard in other places, comparing the early church of Acts to the church now, okay, to the present day church. They didn't have big buildings like this. They didn't have, cool 70-inch TVs, and they didn't have projectors and all the stuff that modern churches have today, but they had the Holy Spirit. And what they did in those times would not have been possible without the Holy Spirit. A.W. Tozer said, if the Holy Spirit were taken away from our church, 95% of what we do would continue and no one would know the difference. If the Holy Spirit had withdrawn from the early church, then 95, which means almost everything, of what they were doing would have stopped and everyone would have known the difference. That's pretty incredible. So, is it possible that we can learn to get along and function without the Holy Spirit?
Without the Holy Spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Get along and function?
Yeah.
Function, sure.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Just go through the motions.
Right. Yeah. So the church is in the condition we're in because we Christian without the Holy Spirit. Right? We go to church, we look the part, but we deny the power of God through an actual living, breathing relationship. Okay? So the weight of evidence here is that, well, we'll go with the text. Half the church has the Holy Spirit, half the church doesn't. If we look at the situation of the time of Laodicea, most of the church are cultural and they're carnal Christians, right? So Paul differentiates between the spiritual and carnal Christians, between those who are filled with the Holy Spirit and those who have no room for the Holy Spirit in their life. Baptized with the Spirit, but not filled with the Spirit. Okay? So this means that as Christians, we could come to church, we can pay our tithe, we could pray, and we could donate to the Worthy School Fund or to Jesus on Prophecy or to these beautiful tablecloths and all this, right? But do it without the Holy Spirit. So all of these things, once we get on like autopilot, once we program the coordinates and the plane just goes, you know how pilots fly today, right? A pilot actually really only takes off and lands. That's all a pilot really does. Once they get up and get to cruising speed, they program the coordinates and the pilot just sits there and the plane goes by computer. Okay? And then they take it off and when they land, because the computer can't land. The pilot lands. So a pilot really lands and takes off. So the thing is, everybody can hone skills of being master deceivers. Right? We can hone our skills of teaching Sabbath school and doing music work and coming to church and such, but
That kind of makes me think, it kind of gives to me a new understanding of the straight and narrow. It isn't just that you cut out worldly things and all that kind of stuff, which is necessary, but it's that if you, I think what we're getting at is it's really easy to fall into habitual, I guess, practices that aren't spirit-filled. And it is a narrow way because it's very easy to fall into, or lean on habits or fall back on custom or whatever your practices are instead of daily seeking renewal. And it's, I can see how it's not a one and done. It's got to be maintained.
right.
And it's easy to think, oh, well, I do all the right things, I don't need to do that. But it's not that straight and narrow, that very specific, I should say, very specific path.
On page 36, it says, the great ethics of the Bible, and this would have been a slide, but the great ethics of the Bible, loving your enemy, forgiving people for everything, overcoming sin, etc., they can only be achieved by the power of the Holy Spirit, not with human effort. This shows us that the main problem in cultural Christianity and carnal Christianity is that living a life solely in human strength cannot be done and get you into the bridegroom. We can't do God's will alone in our own strength. Okay? So Isaiah 64 verse 6, all of our righteousnesses is as filthy rags. Jeremiah 13:23, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Then may you do good who are accustomed to do evil. Ezekiel 36:26 through 27. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. Romans 8:7. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. And the NIV version of the same text, Romans 8:7 says, the mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Okay? Ellen White said very clearly, he who is trying to reach heaven by his own works in keeping the law is attempting an impossibility. Man cannot be saved without obedience, but his works should not be of himself. Christ should work in him both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So it's not you that's keeping the law, it's Christ that's keeping the law through you, right? I was listening to a sermon today while I was mowing the lawn, and it hit me that this is one of the last times I'm ever going to mow that lawn out in Oxford. So the preacher's name was D. Casper, and I'm telling you, if you don't have Audioverse on your phone, you need to. It's an app. You just go to your app store and type in Audioverse, and it's got thousands of Seventh-day Adventist sermons that you could listen to anywhere. That there's wireless, or you have access to your data plan, which in this area, it's everywhere. So he said that one of the reasons our young people leave the church, this is put very well, one of the reasons our young people leave the church is because we focus on how did he say it? We focus on the end result instead of talking enough about how we get to the result. Now, I will maintain that there's several other reasons, like when somebody gets up in front of the church and says we have 5 Bible studies and no one says, hey, I'm willing to take it. Young people see that and they're like, hey, why isn't anybody willing to work? And that's damaging to them. I know it is. But there's other reasons. There's people who say and don't do. There's people who are the jewelry police or the dress police. You know, your skirt's too low, your shirt's too high, blah, 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 right? There are lots of reasons why people leave the church, but there really isn't a reason to leave the church. When it comes down to it, our sin-loving hearts, now I'm going to preach for a second, our sin-loving heart looks for reasons to do what it wants to do. And to use someone else that they hurt my feelings and justifies what I really want to do, which is do what I want to do anyways, and I'm using this other person and how they hurt me so that I can do what I really want to do, is a lie. Just flat out, it's a lie. There is no reason to leave the church biblically. There isn't any biblical reason to leave the church. Except if your church does not teach the truth. Because when Jesus saw that Jerusalem would not teach the truth, what did he do? See, okay, in Matthew 21, he said, my Father's house shall be called a house of prayer. But in Matthew 23, he said, see, your house is left unto you desolate. So in 21, it is my Father's house, but in 23, it's your house. Right? So you want to do the sanctuary? Do it. See if it can save you. Right? All of them didn't have oil. He was trying to give them the oil, but they wouldn't take it. And so he said, guys, if you think the temple can save you, right? The whole thing about the Matthew 24, they were out on a mountain looking down and they saw the temple and they said, Jesus said that, verily I say unto you, one time is coming where not one stone will be left upon another. And they thought, tell us about these signs of the end of the world. And so they thought that the temple being destroyed is the end of the world. And so Jesus was like, in Matthew 23, your house is left unto you desolate. Meaning, you trusted for it to save you because legalism is pushing a button and out it comes. I don't have to think. I don't have to struggle. I do this and I'm saved. It's comfortable. There's no guesswork. I keep this law. I go to the temple. I'm good. And Jesus took that safety net away from them by his life. Through his connection with the Holy Spirit, through his connection with the Father, with a life of self-denial, and with a life of prayer. And so our minds are looking for reasons to justify what we really want to do. And using an example of somebody hurt me just reveals what's already there on the inside, whether we want to admit it or not. Right. And so when someone says, well, this person hurt me, and I just can't see that Christians are, Jesus is like this. Jesus isn't like this. Jesus isn't a cultural carnal Christian. He's a spirit-filled person. And there's certain ways that spirit-filled people act. Go ahead.
No, the only thing I was going to say, you're right. And to counter that, I would say a person who is honestly seeking the truth needs to pray and read the Bible, and then come to a more personal understanding. And then, all human institutions are so flawed that if you look at just the institution, you're never going to find really any satisfaction. You really got to, you've got to base it first on reading the Word of God and finding that connection in your heart, and then understanding that we must do the best we can here in a place where we can meet and share the Word with others. But yeah, if you rely on an institution or you try to pick apart,
It's not, look, everybody has bad days.
sure.
You might even have a bad month or a bad year, right? Or a bad decade. And the bottom line is they all slept and they all slumbered, but when the call was out, 5 went and 5 didn't. Now it's not up to us to be like you have and you don't, right? We're not called to be, judges of character. We're called to be fruit inspectors, right? So someone who has the Holy Spirit is not going to shack up with another woman or man who is not their husband or wife. So there's certain things that you can kind of tell by the barometer of their life where their spiritual commitment is. But the funny thing about it is, one or two little things in their mind may unlock a door that they may go buy oil. So it's not that the person is wearing jewelry, it's that they have some kind of a complex that this makes me look better, and if I really accepted righteousness by faith, I can't really improve on that. So then I don't need it, because when Christ makes me complete, I can't improve that. Right? That's a big difference between, we don't wear jewelry because Seventh-day Adventists don't wear jewelry, which is what I heard growing up. We don't do it because we don't do it. Is bad. It's a bad argument. It's very bad.
I forget what her name was, but he brought her in. She's a professor, and I don't know if she herself was Jewish, but she knew a lot about Jewish practices. And I think what she mentioned is on the Day of Atonement,
No one put on their ornaments and they afflicted their souls. Yeah.
we are in a Day of Atonement right now.
The only problem with that is on the Day of Atonement, they did no work. So if we're going to apply one thing, you got to do the whole thing. But the spiritual aspect is there. It leads to pride. Bottom line, it leads to pride. Guys do not care about your earrings. Okay? They don't. So I've never heard, and I say this in all my Bible studies when I get to this subject and my evangelistic meetings, I have never, Earl, David, have you ever heard any of your friends say, did you get a good look at her pair of earrings? Yeah. Guys don't care. People put that stuff on for other people because they want to look better. That's all there is to it. So it's just a barometer. It's not necessarily a sin. It's a barometer of where the person is spiritually. And it's 9 times out of 10 an education issue, not a rebellious heart. In churches today, this is never talked about. So when we do evangelistic meetings, people come blinging it all out, and there needs to be some education. Righteousness by faith will take care of all of that stuff. And so what D. Casper was saying is that we focus on the end result without talking about the way to get to the end result. which is we're talking about the way to get there at this series that we're doing for prayer meeting or midweek study. So we upplay the externals, but we never talk about the Holy Spirit, because once you start talking about the Holy Spirit, it gets serious, and the doors of our hearts, that hand starts to get on that handle, and we don't want that bad boy to open. So if we just take off all our jewelry, we're fine. Right? So if we just look like we're okay, then we're good. But that will get you to hear the words, "I never knew you. Be gone." And then Jesus says, "You are foolish." And so what Jesus was doing was saying the external goodness is foolishness. Really, in the context, what Jesus was saying was that the religion of the popular time was straight foolishness. So the outward acts of the Pharisees and the outward acts of everything that was going on in Jerusalem that time, Jesus called foolishness. And they were not known by him. They were rejecting the very one who was coming to save them. But what we're doing today is the exact same thing. It's foolishness. So I guess with that, we'll conclude for tonight. But I mean, this is convicting stuff. So anybody have any last thoughts?
Well, I think for me it really comes down to self-will, and the surrendering of self-will is only possible through the Holy Spirit. But when you do, that is sought through the Holy Spirit, then it really is true. Everything takes care of itself. The things gradually take care of themselves. They have to. If you surrender your will to the will of God, then those changes take place.
Right. Anybody else?
The five foolish virgins that tried too late to go in reminded me of how it must have been with all the people at the ark when it started to rain.
Let us in, let us in. Right?
They were warned for 120 years and didn't listen.
Sooner or later, I am going to preach a narrative sermon about someone who wakes up on the other side of the millennium. And I'm going to tell it's going to be total creative writing, so I'm going to basically read the sermon. And it's going to be saying, with all the Bible knowledge that we have from the Bible and with Ellen White, I'm going to say what a person would see based on what is revealed in the Bible and Ellen White and what happens. And then the darkness that the person feels that he comes up in. So I'm gonna put that together sooner or later.
I just think it's wonderful. It's when Jesus says you're a helper and a comforter. And how is people can't take advantage of that? It's there.
All right. Someone like to have a closing prayer?
Thank God for bringing us here this evening to hear the word of God and the pastor. And I like to say, I want everybody to have safe and blessed day back to their destination and make it home safe. God bless everybody. Amen. And see you this Sabbath.
Amen. Okay. Thank you, online audience. Good to see you.